In Melanie Thorne's debut novel, Hand Me Down, we meet 14-year-old Liz, a sassy, smart high school freshman who's like any other 14-year-old, dealing with crushes and whether or not she wants to go to homecoming. However, she's quite different, as she is forced to endure her parents' mistakes while trying to protect her younger sister from their alcoholic father and their mother, who's decided to start a new life with a new man who happens to be a convicted sex offender. Through Liz's first-person account, we travel with her on her painful journey as she's passed from house to house, from state to state, among often unsympathetic family members and friends, after her mother informs her that her new husband is not legally allowed to live under the same roof as an adolescent girl. Our hearts break for Liz as her mother breaks the news to her, and our stomachs turn along with hers every time she's forced to move again. Once you pick up Hand Me Down, it will be impossible for you to put it down, and it will be impossible not to root for this courageous young woman. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Melanie Thorne.
Thank you. Thanks, Krista. That was great. It was a really nice introduction. So nice to be here. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to read two sort of 10-minute-ish, 7 to 10-minute sections from the beginnings. In this first scene, all you need to know is basically what Krista just said. So 14-year-old Liz has been told that she can no longer live at home with her mother and her stepfather, and she has been given a couple of options. And so in this beginning chapter, she's with her father, and she's trying to decide if she wants to go live with her dad, which is where her little sister is. I've been given until January to decide if I want to live with Dad or move in with Mom's sister Tammy in Utah. Mom thought it would be a good idea to spend Christmas with Dad to help my decision-making process. The woman whose worst threats used to include sending me off to stay with him was now saying things like, "It will be good for you to spend more time with your father." As if I really need a weekend with Dad and Crystal to understand how impossible it would be for me to survive in their 2-bedroom trailer. What I need to decide is how well Jaime will survive without me. If not for her, I would run away. But instead, I'm sitting in between her and our father in the front seat of his pickup with the gear shift digging into my thigh and dreaming about my own little cottage in the woods. I'd have a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, big comfy chairs and a skylight, a dog like Rambo for protection. "You know we need to go through Vallejo, right?" I say, and Dad swerves to make the turnoff. Someone honks. "I was testing you," he says. "You think you know everything." I was the one who wanted to bring a map, I say. "We'll find it," he says, and puts his arm around my shoulder. The fake ocean scent of his Old Spice deodorant is sharp in my nose. "Deborah gives good directions," he says. "She's related to me." I roll my eyes. "You didn't write them down." "Don't need to," he says, and nudges my shoulder with his hand. He pokes my temple. "I have an excellent sense of direction." "I have an excellent sense of direction," I say. "Exactly," he says. "I also have a perfect memory." "Me too," Jaime says. "That's my girl," says Dad. Jaime smiles. "I remember being born." "You do not," I say. Jaime turns to me and crosses her arms. "Yes, I do." I tell her I don't even remember. Mom says I took one look at baby Jaime, pink and wrinkly, squirming and wailing in her arms, and I ran out of the room screaming. Mom had to get a nurse to chase me down because Dad didn't show up at the hospital until Jaime was 7 hours old. But of course, she doesn't know that. "So," Jaime says, "I remember things you don't." I think, you have that backwards. "Whatever," I say, crossing my arms over my chest like a shield near Dad's dangling hand. "We should have brought a map." He says, "Don't forget, Liz," and lifts his freckled arm off me. "We're smarter than the average bear," he says in his best yogi voice. A few years ago, it would have been enough to make us laugh. I say, "That won't help us read road signs in the dark." "Lighten up," he says to me, and even though he's not holding a beer, in my head I hear the sound of the can opening, the swift hiss of pressurized air escaping, because it's what usually happens after he tells me that. Jaime says, "Don't you know how to get there?" Dad and I say in unison, "Of course." I stare out the front window, the low winter sun setting behind the hills ahead, the light fractured orange, blue, purple, and pink atop the silver glassiness of the water's surface on either side of this bridge. Jaime and I made this drive with Mom every Thanksgiving I can remember until Terrence showed up. On our way to Aunt Deborah's, Dad's sister and Mom's best friend, through Vallejo and over the Mare Island Causeway, past the giant boats with rows of twinkling lights, circular portholes, and metal fixtures. We passed the marshes full of tall white cranes and egrets standing still as statues in the grass-encircled pools. Pitted and water-beaten wooden poles left over from forsaken piers pierced the water's surface. Little birds perch on top, some tucked in for the night, their feet invisible, their beaks buried under feathered necks. Dad clears his throat the way singers do before a performance, and I wait for his version of an apology. "Hey, a boo-boo," he says, and pats my thigh. "How about some Xmas tunes?" He pushes a button above my knee, and the happy jingle of bells fills the cab. We usually spend this holiday with Mom, enjoying our personal Christmas Eve traditions of eating a fork-optional appetizer dinner, each opening one small gift, reading from the Advent calendar we've mostly memorized, and falling asleep under twinkling strands of colored lights to Mom singing "O Holy Night" in her soothing soprano. But not this year. Deborah won't even have a tree since it was born out of a pagan ritual. The radio starts a nonstop round of Christmas carols, and Frosty the Snowman is first. Dad turns up the volume. "Frosty the Crusty," he sings, "had a big yanker up his nose." Jaime giggles. "Dad," she says. I roll my eyes, even though a few years ago I'd been proud to help him come up with new lyrics, especially if they made Jaime laugh. "You know the words," he says, and sings louder. "It was oversized and it made girls cry, so he flushed it with a hose." He elbows me and smiles. "Everybody." I look at Jaime and she smiles. When the chorus comes on, the three of us belt out, "Frosty the Crusty was a fairy tale, they say, but his big old sneeze will live in memories. He sure made that booger pay." And by the end of the song, I'm smiling too. I think of burping contests and basketball games, pitching a tent in the living room, lighting real campfires and metal buckets on the carpet when Mom was at work. I think of how before I'd understood that fathers were supposed to do more than play and make voices and be funny, my dad had been great. We sing "Rudolph the Fat-Assed Reindeer" and "Silent Fart." Our breaths fog up the windows, and now it's black enough outside that I expect to still be able to see the stark white cranes that live in these marshes, dark enough that it seems like they should glow. We finally make it through Petaluma into Rohnert Park, and after 40 minutes of driving around random neighborhoods looking for Aunt Deborah's street, I say, "Why don't we call her from a payphone?" Jaime is asleep, her face pressed into the glass, her thumb in her mouth. Dad pulls into a gas station and tosses me a quarter. "I'll be right back." I glare at him. "It's none of your business," he says. I kiss Jamie's soft forehead. "Come on, Dad, it's Christmas," I say, scooting under the steering wheel and jumping out onto the asphalt. The wind is warmer here, smells faintly briny like the beach. I unzip my jacket. He says, "And I'm celebrating." "Not here," I say. His features are shadowed in the yellow light from the store, his freckles black spots on his face and arms, but I can see he's pouting. He says, "I'll let you have one." "Like I want a beer," I say. He wags his finger at me. "You're more like me than you think, Liz." I say, "I'll tell Crystal." This is a standoff we've had many times before. Jaime sleeps or watches TV, and Dad and I decide what compromises we are willing to make. Timelines and ounces, offers and counteroffers. 5 blocks, 1 beer. 5 miles, half a beer. Even the cracked asphalt and gasoline perfuming the air are familiar. If Jaime was awake, we would just walk. "Fine," he says, and kicks at a Twinkies wrapper floating across the parking lot. "Not here," he says in a high-pitched, mocking voice. "Promise," I say. "I swear on Santa Claus," he says. He taps his nose with his short, pale index finger and winks. "Go get directions and stop worrying about your dad." I think, it's not you I worry about. "Fine," I say, my fake Converse sneakers swiveling on the pavement toward the phone booth. I don't need to watch him walk to the coolers at the back of the mini-mart, pick the cheapest beer, and take it to the counter. He'll make some joke to the cashier with the under-eye circles and bad skin, who will laugh obligingly at the red-haired man who looks older than his almost 40, whose freckled fingers tremble just a little as he pulls small bills out of his wallet, one by one by one. So that's the father. And now I'm going to read you a scene with the stepfather. Liz has been living with her stepfather's brother since she can't live at home. And she just had a sort of fight with her mother. And then this happens. So, a few days later, Terrence calls while everyone else is at school or work and says Mom wants to have lunch with me. She felt bad about your last talk, he says. Why didn't she call me herself, I say. She's busy and I offered, he tells me. I want my girls to get along. Mom's blue Ford shows up in front of Gary and Carol's house right on time, but as I walk across the yard, I see dark hair above the headrest and brown hands on the wheel. I open the door. Where's Mom, I say, as Metallica screams from the speakers. The smile on Terrence's face falls. She had a last-minute meeting. She thought we might want to spend some time together instead, he says. I'm not going anywhere with you. Not even to a bar? Why would I want to go to a bar? He narrows his eyes. Well, if you're not interested in adult entertainment, he says, then maybe I'll see if Jaime is up for a little fun. He takes me to a dive bar about a mile from Gary's. It has a gravel parking lot, and its weathered wooden planked walls make up the only building in a wide field of weeds and garbage and dust. Terrence opens the solid door for me, and before my eyes can adjust to the darkness, he grabs my hand and skips to a booth in the back. He tries to pull me in next to him, but I shake out of his grip and sit on the opposite bench. I recommend the sausage plate, he says, nice and juicy. He nods at the bartender, a dyed redhead wearing a leather biker vest over a ragged-edged tank top that showcases the red lace of her bra. Her arms are colorfully tattooed, and as she struts towards us, I see her belly button is pierced with a silver hoop. What'll it be, sweets, she says to Terrence, leaning over the table so her boobs are about 3 inches from his face. He doesn't bother hiding his enjoyment. 2 brat plates, he says, slipping a 20 down into the bottom of her jean shorts pocket. She jerks a thumb at me. A little younger than usual, she says. Terrence says, is that a problem? Does he come here a lot, I say, with different women? She ignores me, but the answer is obvious. Mom is so stupid. Not if you make it up to me, the waitress says, and I don't know if she means sex or money. She bends forward far enough that I can see her butt cheeks and whispers something in Terrence's ear. He sighs, open-mouthed and breathy, almost a moan, a sound I recognize from his late-night bed-rocking sessions with Mom. Redhead spins on her heels and returns to the bar. Did you sleep with her, I say? Terrence rests his head against the seat back and leaves his mouth half open. Cody told me about your night playing darts, he says. Do you cheat on Mom a lot, I say? He says, I love your mom very much. He shrugs. Cody's a friend of mine, you know. He said you were mighty frisky that night, drinking and flirting. So you'll tell Mom about my drinking if I tell her you're having sex with slutty bartenders? Cody wanted to hang out again sometime, but I told him you were off limits, he says. I can take care of myself. Are you sure about that, he says? I would never hurt you, Liz. Your family. My breath catches. Is Cody a sex offender too? Terrence nods. The best of us are so unsuspicious. He smiles. Cody had hugged me, held my hand, put his arm around my shoulders, and he's like Terrence. I think I might vomit. The waitress plops down our food and a Budweiser. Wilted lettuce sits under 3 fat, pale hot dogs and a pickle spear. My already churning stomach spasms. 2 brat plates, she says. She winks at Terrence, and I think of all the times he's done the same to me. You know how I like warm sausage, she says, and leaves. Terrence grabs a fork from the plastic 7-Eleven Big Gulp cup. He squirts spicy mustard onto his plate. How's school, he says. He dips his sausage in mustard and bites a chunk off the end with his chipmunk teeth. I say, I thought we weren't supposed to be alone together. He sighs and puts down his fork. I know, he says. He lays his forearms flat on the table, reaching for me, but I'm too far away for him to make contact. It sucks, he says. Sweat prickles under my skin, spreading from my palms and armpits. What if I called your parole officer right now? Good luck, he laughs. Kayla over there knows the drill. He sucks juice off the end of his pickle spear. She's supervising. He nods at red-haired Kayla, who's drying shot glasses. So, Terrence says, leaning back, talk to me. Have you been made out? Have you made out? Been felt up? Do you like it? I pull my feet up onto the booth, hug my knees to my chest like I can block his voice with my shins. He says, sex is awesome, but there are consequences. You should wait until you're ready, and you should tell someone if you're being pressured. He eats the flesh of the pickle and leaves the dark green skin on his plate. You can tell me anything, Liz, he says. I'm practically your dad. I would prefer to be here with my father, watering down his drinks and hiding his keys. At least I have tools for that scenario. Terrence lowers his voice. You're still a virgin, right? He chuckles. Of course you are. He raises one eyebrow and presses his lips in on each other. I lost my virginity when I was about your age. He wriggles both hands into the pockets of his shorts and leaves them there. He says, do you think you might try it soon? His words are like worms, thousands of them, slithering across my skin, tangling in my gut, filling my mouth. I need to take a shower. I can walk to Gary's from here. I can call Mom. I can call his parole officer. I can call the police. Terrence leers at me while I somersault through my options, try to swallow the writhing mass of slime and find my voice. You're disgusting, I say. I can't believe Mom lets you touch her. She loves when I touch her, he says, tilting his head so his neck cracks. Most women do. I'm out of here, I say, sliding out of the booth. Terrence pouts, but we just got here. Faster than I expect, he swings his body into mine before I can stand up. He pushes in next to me, and I'm forced to backpedal across the cracked leather bench to the wall. He sits and rotates his chest to face me, lifting his leg to rest it on the seat. He glares at me with eyes focused like a stalking lion. He smiles with just the right side of his mouth. We haven't had any fun yet, he says. I am suddenly scared. I know what Terrence is capable of. I know public places are his hunting ground. I know he likes to put on a show and usually doesn't harm his victims, but I also know one of his assaults put a woman in the hospital. And there are probably a dozen attacks for every time he got caught. I say, you think I won't tell Mom about this? You think she will believe you? All I have to do is kiss her and... He raises his hands to fondle the air. She says yes to anything, he says. He scoots closer. It's like I'm magic. He inhales deeply near my neck, and I try to recoil, but I'm already flush with the wall and my bones won't compress any further. You smell amazing, he says, nudging my hair with his nose. He smells like musk and rubbing alcohol. His wet lips touch my ear as he says, you're beautiful, Liz. I clench my eyes shut and wish I could melt into the wallpaper, become the grime that's dirtying my shirt, the tacky food and dust and booze mix that's mostly unnoticed in these dark booths where things are meant to go unnoticed. Except I feel the goop sticking to my bare arms and my hair as I pretend Terrence's body is not hovering 1 inch from the length of mine. Like a sexier, younger version of your mother, he says, and his breath reeks of pork. Just like Jaime will be, he says. I tense, and he's close enough to feel the contraction of my every muscle. He laughs, and I wish my Achilles heel wasn't so easy to spot. Why are you doing this? I whisper. I sense his hands drifting over my waist, my thighs, close enough that I feel their heat but not their weight. I think of Jaime trying to get my attention, waving her hands a centimeter from my face and chanting, I'm not touching you. I want to cry, but I'm aware he's testing me, measuring my resistance, how much I'll do to keep Jaime from moments like this. I feel the wind from his moving lips on my mouth as he says, because I can. He laughs and exits my personal space, and I like to win. Thank you.
In Melinda Moustakis' debut collection, Bear Down, Bear North, Alaska Stories, she, like her characters, tells stories of survival. In her story, The Weight of You, she conveys through her character Gracie what it is to love your home, to feel so deeply connected to its inhabitants despite what they've put you through that you're willing to risk your life. In one scene, Gracie puts herself between a loaded gun and a wild moose she calls Grandpa. Things are further complicated by the fact that her family is starving and her mother, desperate to feed her family, is on the other end of that gun. In the words of Gracie, if there's one thing you know, it's that love is fierce. Readers understand that it is this fierce love that has gotten her through the Alaskan winters and has helped her survive extreme poverty and an abusive father. It's the fierce love that all of us have felt in the moment we're forced to protect those we love from others and from themselves. It's the love that Gracie and her brother feel for each other and the love that keeps her from leaving home. Melinda Moustakis' beautiful collection is so resonant to those of us who have a love-hate relationship with the place we call home, and those of us who know the fierce, complicated love of family, that her stories are somehow familiar to us, even if we've never stepped foot in Alaska or felt the deep, dark cold her characters know so well. Her stories have appeared in the Alaska Quarterly Review, Kenyon Review, New England Review, Conjunctions, Cimarron Review, American Short Fiction, and elsewhere. She was recently named a 2011 5 Under 35 writer by the National Book Foundation and is currently a 2012-2013 Hodder Fellow at the Lewis Center of the Arts at Princeton University. It's my pleasure to present to you my friend Melinda Moustakis.
Thanks, Krista. And thanks so much for having Melanie and I. It's so fun to see, Krista again, and to read with Melanie has been such a pleasure. So thank you for bringing us out here. It's like a mini reunion. So I'm going to read, I start off every reading with the short that begins the collection called Trigger, and I'll read that, and then I'm going to read a full-length story. And I guess just what I need to tell you is that this book is a linked story collection about one family of through generations of a family of homesteaders, and they're also fishermen and fisherwomen and hunters, and I think that sort of gives you an idea of what it's about. And can everyone hear me in the back? I know I don't have like a deep rumbling voice like I wish I had. Trigger. You were conceived on a hunting stand, they say, which means we had no other place. The homestead is full of my mother's siblings. On the stove, a pot of potato chow big enough to feed 20. See my mother, back roughed against the wooden platform in the trees. See my father, finger on the trigger, in case. You have to gut a moose right away, they say, or the meat rots in its skin, which means we couldn't keep our hands off each other. The night of my making, my father shot a moose through the eye, through the skull and brain and bone, through to the other side. My mother found the red-tipped bullet in the summer dirt. They keep it on the mantle next to a sepia photo, them steering the rack of the dead bull. They say, you came into the world with a bang, which means do something to deserve us. So that's how the book begins, literally with a bang. And I'm going to read actually about Gracie, so it's good that Krista introduced that character. And this is the last story in the collection. It's called The Last Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show. And there's titled sections, so I'll tell you the title and read you the section. So that just explains the structure. And the titles are the names of lumberjack events. They're these big contests, sort of like an obstacle course, but with chainsaws. These are the events. So here's the Last Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show. Hot saw. You check the choke on the chainsaw. Pull the starter cord. The engine is warm but sputters. You pull again and the engine floods. Turn the choke and throttle off. Pump the cord several times. Move the choke. Pull the cord 3 times. You wait. Pull again. There's a buzz, then everything dies. You fall away from each other. We could try other things, you say. It's no use, Hyde says. He doesn't know you've made him a doctor's appointment for next week. I'm going crazy, you say. You've been noticing how everything else in the world is tall and erect. Your bedpost, trees, utility poles. How do you think I feel, he says. He escapes to the bathroom. The pipes whine as he starts the shower. All you want to do lately is yes, oh God, yes, and you don't care how. You'd have sex with Hyde's knee if you had to, or his elbow. Now he's in the shower, and he'll have that clean smell, and of course there's the basil oil you sneak into his shampoo, and you won't be able to take it. He says he's stressed at work. A new lineman is being a pain in the ass, the son of one of his good friends. He says he needs a little time, and that was a month ago. In the meantime, you're having sex dreams about the letter L, once with the letter L and the letter Q, but usually only the L. L is cold, quick, efficient. And you wonder if this is normal, these fantasies with members of the alphabet. You tell Hyde most of your dreams, but not these, no, not these. Should you be worried? You can't even think of a man you know whose name starts with L. No Lukes, no Lyles, no Linuses. Or maybe it stands for every single loser you've ever dated. If you two weren't having this problem, he'd probably think your dream was hilarious. Hang a huge cardboard L on the bedroom ceiling as a joke. Find ways in public to say, Gracie just loves elk meat. Last year you dreamt that sperm had become airborne, like a virus, tiny particles in the air impregnating anyone who breathed them in. So Moody was going to have a baby, and Slug had gotten a girl pregnant. Hyde woke you up, said you were talking loud in your sleep again. You told him. He laughed, howled really. You said, who the hell needs to think about this kind of shit? Then later that summer, at your cabin near the Kenai, the cottonwoods were blooming, and he said, oh my God, honey, run for your life, airborne sperm. He pointed to a flurry of tufted seeds sailing in the air and picked you up and ran. You thought, this is why I fucking love this man. Axe throw. Your daughter Moody has perfect aim. She says, I hate you. You're old and ugly, so you think I have to look like shit too. The axe flips blade over handle over and over and lands in the center of the painted bullseye on your chest, rib bones splintering like wood. You could slap her heavily made-up face. That's not your style. You could walk out of her room and never speak to her again. But you say, you're right, honey, I'm ugly as all hell. And then you laugh, the inappropriate laugh. Once the word coma put you in a rapturous fit, even though it was in reference to your estranged father, his stroke, and he never woke up. You want to take her face in your hands and press so hard, fast forward 10 years, make her a creature that doesn't terrify you. But you would rather she be terrifying, sharp-tongued, a fighter. You know that as long as she's fighting you, she's hearing some of what you're saying. Let's slam all the doors in the whole damn house, you say. Better yet, let's light this place on fire. Let's start with all the crap in your room. You pick up a pile of the slutty clothes she borrowed from a friend and throw them on a bed. No daughter of yours is going to risk hypothermia in order to be ogled by junior high boys. Get me a match, you say. It's not crap, she says. She doesn't believe you'll do it. Go, you say. She brings back a box of matches. You strike one up. You've totally lost it, she says. I haven't lost anything, you say. You blow out the flame. Not yet. When you were 11, your mother took you salmon fishing at the usual spot on the Russian River, just the two of you. You were covered in fish slime and scales because your job was to bonk the salmon after they'd been ripped out of the river. She said, I want you to know that soon you're going to think you're right about everything and I'm wrong about everything. You're going to say terrible things to me and you'll actually mean them. You told her you would never do that. You will, she said. You'll even wish I was dead. And I want you to know it won't stay that way. I want you to remember me telling you that this would happen. And you did. You'd start to heat up with rage over curfew and suddenly turn cold just to prove her wrong. Your mother, the bomb diffuser. It worked on you, but not on your brother, and not on your own kids. Log rolling. You have to keep talking so you don't lose her. You're both balancing on a log in the river, and at any moment she could slip, fall back into the churning water where you can't reach her. Your mother waits for the long-term care nurse to go clean the bathroom. She makes a cat claw with her arthritic hand and hisses. I don't like her, she whispers. You don't like anybody, you say. That's true, she says with satisfaction. The kids are good, you say, to keep things moving. Slug just got his license, so now he drives Moody to school in the Beast. They're growing up so fast, makes you want to lock them away in their rooms. They locked me away in this room, she says. They did. She stares into your eyes, studying, questioning. She once made you promise never to put her in a home. The log rolls faster and you pedal. I brought you blueberry pie, you say. Would you like some? Let's go out for pie, she says. I can leave, you know. She teeters over the edge, arms flapping. Let's eat here. You sound like my husband, she says. Have you met my husband? She crashes into the river. The wake makes you wobble. I've met him, you say. Where's my fat son, she says. Have you met him? Your brother has never been fat, unless you count infancy. He is all muscle, and sometimes you think even his brain is a bicep. He does not come to visit your mother. You feed her small bites of pie with a spoon. She worked on the recipe for years. Lemon zest and fresh basil bring out the blue in blueberry. We could go out for dinner, she says. Just push my chair. Not today. You're alone, the log slowing under your feet. You kiss her goodbye and she grimaces. Her white hair is pulled back into one long braid. They were going to cut it and you begged them not to, paid them extra for the braiding. She wouldn't care if they gave her a buzz cut, but you would. You're the only one who visits her. At home, the rest of the blueberry pie waits on the counter. You scoop out the middle with your bare hands. Underhand chop. You stand on the log with the axe raised over your head. You have to aim true so you don't hit your own feet. What is it, you say? What the hell is the matter? Life, he shrugs. You'd have never let his nickname Slugger be shortened to Slug if you knew it was going to be prophetic. Same with Moody, called as such because neither she nor Slug could say Melody. Some days, you wonder if you should have ever moved to the city 6 years ago, if you could call Anchorage a city. Hyde's commute would have been too far. But you miss the river. You change tactics and turn around and chop the other side. We're going to the cabin, you say. You and Moody are skipping school tomorrow. This is a fucking family emergency. And what you mean is, you need these kids to shape up, or take shape, emerge out of their oily skin suits and be human again. I'm not going, he says. You're going, you say, or you find another place to live. I'll send you to Uncle Jack. What? He says. You can't do that. Yes, you say. Yes, I can. Start packing. Tell Moody. The Beast is a 1975 Suburban that Hyde has rebuilt and had forever, and will have forever, unless the thing blows up into a million pieces, and even then, you'd think he'd try to repair it. The Beast is known to have problems starting up at times, which might have something to do with the spark plug you were removing to make sure Moody and Slug don't take off in the middle of the night to avoid going to the cabin. You hide the spark plug in Hyde's toolbox in the garage. Moody rushes toward you when you walk through the door. I have to go to school tomorrow, she says. You can't do this. It's against the law or something. You stand on a new, fresh log and raise the axe. When have you, Miss C. Average, ever wanted to go to school? Ever since Dallas or Dakota or whatever his name is, says Slug from upstairs. Shut up, says Moody. You know the rules, you say. No dating anyone named after a city or a state. Oh my God, she says, you pull the blade out and swing again. Maybe if you got better grades, you could think of something, you say. You're ruining my life, she says. Sweetheart, you ruined mine a long time ago, you say, with a final chop. Go pack some clothes, grab some work gloves while you're at it. Jack and Jill Buck. Hyde comes home from his 12-hour shift at 2 in the morning. He immediately showers. You sit on the closed toilet seat and tell him about Moody and Slug taking them to the cabin. The basil oil in his shampoo is steaming all around you. He pokes his head around the curtain. Get your ass in here, he says. His eyes are smiling. Show me what Moody thinks is old. You throw off your pajamas and step into the tub. I had to fire Anders' kid, he says, soaping his chest. Told him to go redo his safety certification, and we talk about giving him another chance. Thought he was going to get himself electrocuted today. He spins and rinses. How did Ander take it? Huge weight off my shoulders. He leans and backs you up against the tile, breathes into your ear, which means this is what should happen next. You each have a grip on the saw. The MC says 1, 2, 3, go, and it's a synchronized give and take, the teeth cutting through the white pine log. No kinks or bends, no snags. Sawdust flying because this is your event. Damn it, says Hyde. You wait. I guess it's time to see the doctor, he says. 10 a.m. Thursday, you say. He turns away. You put a hand on his back. This is what's happening, he says, and he gets out of the shower. You said the same thing when you found out you were pregnant with Slug, and Hyde made you an appointment to see an AA sponsor. Single buck. Jack has set up camp in a small cabin near the Kenai River, down 3 gravel roads, then a dirt path just wide enough to fit a truck. He and Jean separated. He told you it was a mutual decision. She told you it was a mutual disaster. She said, he puts the SOB in sober, you know what I mean? He said, she puts the bitch in bitch. Jack is outside with a small chainsaw when you arrive. Log pine cuts 3 feet tall are lined up on a picnic table. He's working on one cut with small slashes. You didn't know he'd taken up chainsaw carving. The cast-off carvings sit on the ground. A wing with a missing tip, a split beak. Some are hacked in half. A deformed bunch of almost eagles stare at you, a flock of fuck yous. Jack's blue t-shirt has a bib of sweat and sawdust. Gracie, he says, was wondering when you'd come find me. Thought I'd see if you wanted to go fishing. You're checking up on me, he says. You pick up a broken wooden wing covered in prickle cuts that are an attempt at feathers. Besides, I'm always fishing, he says. That's my problem. I got 2 problems back at our cabin, you say. I put them to work chopping wood. The good old lumberjack cure, he says. They just don't know how good they have it, you say. You know how it is. I once threatened to make the kids eat earthquake stew. Jean threw a fit. How are they taking the news? They're not surprised, he says. You hold up the eagle wing. I want one of these once you get it right. Can't fucking drink, he says. Have to do something. Then let me take you out on the boat. He shakes his head. You drive like shit, and I know how you like to go alone. Tree climb. You pick up the boat and trailer from a lot behind Bing Brown's grocery and liquor. You've heard people say every woman needs her own room. What every woman really needs is her own boat, her own river. At Double R Marine, you sell boats to fishermen and hunters and guides, and rarely to women. You see the disappointment in the bearded faces when you're assigned to help them instead of read. They think you don't know what you're talking about, and you dig in with your spikes, and it's a race to the top of the tree. Question after question, a test. Sometimes you make up stories and tell them your father was a guide on the Kwijak or the Talkeetna. If they double-check your answers with Reed, he says, she does rivers, I do ocean. We've never had a problem. And then they believe that they need a John boat with a detuned 50. You memorize river regulations every year, and Reed says you're a damn dictionary. You drive the boat to the launch. Someday you'd like to have a cabin right on the river, tie the boat off on your own bank where you can slay reds when they run. But for now, it's enough to drive to Soup Roll and take the inside drift around the wide curve, hug a gravel bar, and drag the pocket for rainbows. Forget about selling boats. Forget Moody and Slug and Hyde. Forget Jack, who won't talk about your mother or visit her. Forget your mother, who is forgetting you. Here, you are hook and line. Springboard chop. There's more wood to chop, you say to Moody and Slug. You know they didn't chop as much as they could while you were fishing. They're not happy with you. Get it all out there, you say. Anger and hormones and being powerless and young. This is the exercise they need, or the exorcism. Build a bridge, you want to say. Build something. Stop scowling and hunching. Build a monument worthy of your misery. Carve a giant hand flipping off the sky. Just do something. For how long, they want to know. You want them to double their stacks. Then what? Pizza at Magpies, you say. Hyde shows up, a day early. Switch some shifts around, he says when you walk toward him. He nods at Moody and Slug and their axes. How'd you work that? You put your arm around him. Look at what we made, you and me, Buster. What were we thinking? I was thinking I wanted more of you in the world, he says. More of us. We're idiots, you say. Well, someday it will be just us idiots at the cabin, fucking our brains out. Promise, you say? If they ever ask you what it's like being a parent and adult, you know what to say. That's if they live that long, if you don't kill them first with too much wood chopping, if they don't kill themselves or ride in a car driven by a drunk friend named Scully or Bevo. So many ifs, and you can only shoot so many of them out of the air. If they ask, this is what you will tell them. The river is rising too fast, a flash flood. You chop a slot into a tree, chip into the trunk with 4 swings. You insert a plank into the slot and climb onto it. If the river soaks the plank and your feet, you make a higher mark with the axe at waist level. Put another plank in the slot and climb. There's no telling the number of people you fit on this skinny piece of wood. Too many and not enough. But this is how you stand on water. Thanks.
With a novel, I think it's hard to choose something that won't give too much away, but that will make sense to readers. So I chose things that were early in the book, and also that sort of flow and make sense and are hopefully easy to follow out loud.
Sometimes there are a lot of stories in this book that wouldn't work reading out loud because of their structure. It would be really confusing. So I'm sort of limited in the number of stories I can read, but also I guess all the stories are a little dark, but some are more so than others. So sometimes I'm just feeling like, I wanted to read, usually it's funny, The Last Great Alaska Lumberjack Show. I think it's funny, I guess. It's funny. Maybe I have a dark sense of humor, but I just kind of feel like, and you try to think about the audience. Like sometimes you feel more jovial, and then some days you're like, I'm just gonna devastate the reader. So maybe being around you, Melanie, I was like, I'm gonna read a happier story.
My stuff is depressing.
Yeah, maybe.
So I really like, after I read that sort of intense scene at the end, I love looking up and seeing everybody's faces. Like, oh my God. That's really gratifying. It's just really a great feeling. So thank you.
children, and I'm not 50 yet. Not yet. No, shocking. So for me, that story was really sort of, it was the third story I wrote from Gracie's point of view and her perspective. So I felt like I knew her, and each story is like 5 to 10 years later than the previous one in the book. So by this time, I sort of felt like I knew her, and then I sort of, like the line, "You're going to say terrible things to me," or was sort of a conversation my father, when I was like 11, he's like, "Just so you know, soon you're going to think you know everything," and like try to explain what it's like to be an adolescent, which is such a brilliant move. Mm-hmm. I think it's because he used to play chess, and he's like, "I'm going to like outwit you." And so I had sort of imagined that conversation again, but between the mother and daughter. But also I just thought about, I think, teaching, how it's wonderful, but you feel responsible for these people in your class, really made me think about, what if it was like you couldn't leave them at school, and you had to like take them home with you? And then I really thought about my mom, like what it was like. She had like 3 teenagers at the same time, and just so trying to just put yourself in those perspectives and being like, how do you have responsibility for these people that are just...
What did your mom think about it?
That story in particular? No, she loved the book. Her favorite characters are the really sort of harsh, strong mothers. She just finds them fascinating and really hilarious, which is great, because sometimes when your mom reads your book, she thinks any mom character is yours. But she finds the moms like super fascinating and hilarious. So yeah.
Since my book is semi-autobiographical, I read a lot of my old journals and really like researched my own voice, and that was helpful. And then I sort of feel like a 15-year-old in my head sometimes. I sort of feel like I can't believe that I've grown up. So a lot of that was just pulling up sort of messier, less mature thoughts that I have now, as sort of teenage thoughts. And plus, I think I really tried to make Liz more complicated than I think adults give teenagers credit for, because that's something that I really think that when we grow up, we forget what it's like to be a teenager, and we think kids are stupid and that they don't see things or they can't understand things, and it's just not true. And so I made an effort to make her a complicated, realistic teenager. No, we want you all to be depressed forever. I think it sort of depends. I don't think I was thinking about social change again. I sort of just wanted to tell my story, and I think that talking about these things, if it gets out there and people start talking about family secrets, that's great. I love that, and it's already happening with the book coming out. I did try to make there is one sort of good role model in my book that Liz has. Her aunt Tammy is a strong female who's nice to her. One of the few adults in that book who is a strong role model, because we all have that, right? If you're going through these traumas, if you don't have someone, you give up hope. And Liz really needed at least that one person to be there for her.
Yeah. I think for me, I personally don't like books where you feel like there's no hope, because I feel like that's sort of unrealistic and not reality. I mean, usually there's, even if it's a glimmer. In this book, I mean, I'm dealing with winter. There's issues of, alcoholism and domestic violence, which are two huge issues in Alaska. And I think for both of us, I'm not trying to speak for you, but for both of us, the importance is to tell these stories and to get sort of like these characters out there, and to evoke sort of empathy, but to make people think about these things. I mean, I think it'd be very difficult to write a book and be like, I'm going to invoke social change by with my novel. I think it would turn into a horrible novel. I mean, I think there are probably more realistic things you could do, like action. But like writing is supposed to, I think it's a very personal thing and what you think art should do, but to me, empathy seems the biggest thing, to show these characters, but to also, what was that line you said earlier, Jay? Thought and, it was good.
I don't know.
Feeling and thought.
So
Like
think and feel. You want
yes.
people to think and then feel, right? Yeah, that was fun.
But for me, I mean, these characters, like, a lot of tough things happen, but, you know, there's humor, because that's a survival mechanism. They tell stories. There's this idea of family loyalty, and there's also, I mean, just like being in Alaska when you can have a terrible winter, but then the skies will clear and there's sparkling stars, and there's these moments of beauty that sort of catch you by surprise. But that's, for me especially, that's often the Alaska, the really pretty, majestic Alaska is what people know, and they don't know the dark undercurrents, or like what I feel is like a more truthful, more complex, like complicated love letter to the state is how I look at this book. So I think we're always trying to find paradox and complexity, and just like people, they can be great, but there's flaws, and you're trying. I think that's one of my aims, is to show both of those sides.
And I also, in terms of the darkness, I feel like the moments that are the saddest can also often be the most beautiful moments. So it's not, you don't want to shy away from those, because that's where the empathy comes from. That's where the emotion comes from, and I think it's important. And like you said, I mean, if you don't have hope at all, we all give up, right? If there's no hope, you give up, and that's a pointless story. So there has to be some, even if it's just a tiny bit. Yeah.
Like, I remember reading Where the Red Fern Grows, and I thought, if I could make someone cry so hard like this someday with a book, that would be fantastic. I just remember thinking, like, it was just amazing, and I'm like, and it's about these dogs, like, why am I crying, like, so much? But I mean, this is a long time ago, and now, I mean, but that would be great to have, you know,
To make people cry.
in a good way. Yeah.
We hate you. We just want you to go home and be sad.
But, like, crying can be great. For both of us, we're writing realistic fiction, realism. So there's, like life, there's a mixture, you know. Yeah. And so part of it is, I feel like if I'm scared to write something, there's something there I need to write, because I don't understand it myself, and there's an importance there. And I think it's just a question of, for writers, and the enduring question of, what is art supposed to do in the world? Is it supposed to just entertain, or are there, there's that, and can it teach you things? Absolutely. Is it supposed to, like, bring you low? Yeah. I mean, I think lessons are difficult, and so sometimes you have to feel intensely, and it will be uncomfortable and upsetting, but that doesn't mean it can't be useful or beautiful.